Oh, hello. How do you do? I am Anri of Astora, unkindled like you. This is Horace, a friend and travelling companion. Are you too in search of the Lords of Cinder? We are well along the road of sacrifices. Below us is the Crucifixion Woods. Beyond the flooded woods lies Firelink Keep, home of the Undead Legion. Further yet is the Cathedral of the Deep. We seek the cathedral, home of the grim Aldrich. We may go our separate ways now, but we are both seekers of lords. The next time we cross paths, one may find the other in a time of need. May the flames guide your way.
Hello everyone, this is Aegon of Astora, and welcome back to Dark Souls 3 Let's Talk Lore. This is episode number 9 being recorded on Tuesday the 20th of December. I hope you're all having a fantastic day today, whenever it is you find yourself watching this. If all goes according to plan, you should be watching this on Soulsmas 2016, that is December 25th. I seem to recall, I know that last year I released a bunch of videos in a playlist called Soulsmas Stocking Stuffers. I don't know that I will have time to do the same this year, but I seem to recall also releasing either on Christmas or the day before an episode of Let's Talk Lore, so I figured I might as well try my best to maintain that tradition and try to have this video released today in time for, Soulsmas 2016 rather. We also have, this is pretty much the shortest turnaround time, at least that I can recall, perhaps save for last Christmas, between recordings of episodes of Let's Talk Lore. Although the previous episode was recorded, it was actually recorded, that is the gameplay, something like 2 weeks before we actually, 2 weeks before Mitch and I actually got around to finding a period of time in common where we could both record. But even still, all of this is to say that I released episode 8 today, so we won't have any comments guiding us, because there were only a couple of comments last time I checked. And so obviously the comments segment of this episode will be recorded either later on tonight, or more likely tomorrow when I have a few more comments to choose from. But we are going to, for the first time, we're not going to go all the way up the tower there, because we're not quite ready to talk about all that stuff just yet, and I figure we might as well wait for another event that's going to happen. So we're going to leave we're not going to read the tower key item description again, just because we'll read it when it's more relevant. But I did want to trade a couple things with the crow, so we're going to do that. But yeah, we are going to leave the elevator there for now. In part because, I want to make sure that the gameplay isn't trifling lore talk. Isn't stifling lore talk, I should say.
You. Me, Pickle Pea. Me, Pump-a-Rum.
So I don't know if the crow's actual name is Pickle Pea Pump-a-Rum, but on the Fexer Life wiki, that's what they have listed. And I can never remember, I can remember a few things that the crow wants for certain items, but I tend to forget, so...
You! Me, Pickle Pea. Me, Pump-a-Rum.
Yes, I know, friend. I was just explaining to the viewers that, I will be relying on...
You! Me, Pickle Pea. Me, Pump-a-Rum.
Stop doing that. Okay, I think if you're paused, it won't do that. But I'm using the Fextra Life page, which has sort of a table. Shows the item you give, the item you receive, so I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. The crow is named on that page, at least, as Pickle P Pump-a-Rum, but I don't know if that's the actual crow's name. And yeah, this, like the crow thing, I don't know to what extent there's much lore that can be talked about, but I wanted to leave that possibility open in case anyone had any ideas, because as you'll see, like we're going to be returning here because there are certain items that we can get now and certain that we're going to need to get later. But I did want to get as many upgrade materials as possible so that, yeah, we could continue to upgrade our primary build for this playthrough, so as to ensure that, you know, we're actually able to talk about lore and that we're not, you know, that the series isn't getting bogged down by me playing terribly. So the more overpowered we can make this build, the better. So yeah, without further ado, let's trade some items.
Pump-a-Rum, 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 Pump-a-Rum.
So I figured I'd leave that in case anyone hasn't seen that or heard that yet, but yeah, I'm gonna mostly fast forward the rest of this.
Pump-a-Rum, Pump-a-Rum, Pump-a-Rum. Pickleby, 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 Pickleby.
Thank you. Our first carving.
Help me.
Which is a carving that was not in Dark Souls 2, was in Dark Souls 1. They took it out in Dark Souls 2 for whatever reason and brought it back in this game. Don't really know if that means anything, probably doesn't, but yeah.
Pump-a-Rum, 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 Pump-a-Rum.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it for now. But we are going to go grab the Estus Shard. You can, of course, use that tree to jump up here, but I'm not especially good at it, so that's why I figured we'd just use the key. There is an illusory wall over here. Which leads to a chest that has a covetous silver serpent ring in it. But we're going to leave that for now, for reasons which will be obvious. For reasons which will be obvious later in the playthrough. But yeah, I will be certain to remind you when that becomes relevant again, and then we'll talk about that. There are also a couple of crystal lizards over there, but it looks like we need to get back up onto the roof before we can go grab them. So let's go do that. So yeah, I hope you're all having a happy and healthy holiday season, and that you're able, hopefully, to find some time to spend with your loved ones. Because yeah, everyone deserves at least a little bit of time off. When I was, up until I was, I think, 21, how old was I? I worked at a movie theater from 2002 to 2010? 2002 to 2009, so I would have been 23, yeah, pretty much from the time I was 15 until I was around 23. I didn't have much of a holiday season because I worked at a movie theater where it was our job to basically be working while everyone else was off. So it's still very strange for me having time off when I used to not. during this period of the year. Even though, yeah, I have tons of work that I probably should be doing, but, you know, I went almost a month, if not over a month, without recording for this series, so I wanted to get a couple episodes done so that, you know, you guys all know that I've not forgotten about you or the series or anything like that. So now that we've done, I think, all the trading we need to do, I guess there was only one crystal lizard behind there. We do need to trade in ashes. Oh, we're trading in our Estus shard first. And then we have some ashes to trade in.
Ah, well met. 'Tis good to see ye in good health. What needs smithing this day?
Oh, and we can upgrade our Astora sword to +3. Or to +4, rather. I think we should do that. And then we're going to go back to using that until we can get some more Titanite scales for the Hollow Greatsword. Or Hollow Slayer Greatsword, I should say. Unless... no. Yeah, let's do that. It might also be time to put it back to Refined, or to infuse it with Refined instead of Raw. So right now we're getting 229 out of it. But if we infuse it with Refined... actually, not yet. That would only give us 222, so we're still 7 attack points down. But, yeah.
Prithee, be careful. I don't want to see my work squandered.
Thank you kindly. So we're doing slightly less damage, 235 to 229, but of course the stamina usage is much lower. So, and it weighs less, so we're gonna, yeah, keep using the Astora sword for now. Because this is a boss weapon, technically, the upgrade level, instead of looking at it as +1, +4, it's probably better to look at it as +2 versus +4. Because this one can go all the way up, it can only go up to +5, whereas this one can go up to +10. So mechanically, in terms of the game's multiplayer, it considers this a +2 weapon instead of a +1 weapon, because it only goes up to +5.
Ah, well met, Ashen One. How may I be of service? Gracious, passing fine ash thou'st given. Let this ash bestow nourishment. I only hope these new wares content thee.
Alright, so we got a fair bit of new stuff here, if I recall correctly. I believe we got some more embers. I don't believe we had blooming purples before. I could be wrong about that, though. We definitely did not have unlimited supplies of these. So, Undead Hunter Charm. Tool used, so the ashes we traded were Paladin's ashes, so this makes sense. Tool used to hunt down the undead. Blocks Estus recovery within a limited area. Used long ago by Lloyd's cleric knights on their undead hunts. Although Allfather Lloyd is long forgotten by the Way of White, his hunts have lived on, and this charm allows one to challenge undead without fear of tenacious healing. Then we also have the Duel Charm, the description for which reads, tool used in duels of judgment, nulls effects of special area effects for a short time. Allfather Lloyd's knights lived in fear of his duels of judgment, in which verdicts were carried out by his sword of law. So this one is used to prevent healing, and interestingly we can see a little bit more detail here than we used to be able to see. We can see chains hanging off of the charm along the right hand side there. And I'm just noticing this for the first time. Those look a lot like the chains, even though they are just chains. They do look a lot like the chains that we find in the Deacons of the Deep boss room. But more on that in the next episode, because this episode we're likely only going to explore the outside of the cathedral. And then the next episode, for which we will hopefully have a guest or two on, yeah, we're going to explore the interior of the cathedral. We'll probably we'll see if we can open up all the shortcuts for this episode, and then just sort of slowly walk through it and talk with our guests in the next episode if we wind up being able to work that out, timing-wise. So yeah, so this one is to get rid of buffs instead of nulls effects of special area effects for a short time. So this one gets rid of buffs, this one gets rid of the ability to heal, both of them temporarily, of course. We also get the Morning Star, a hammer with a sharp spike on its pommel, one of the more barbaric cleric weapons. The sharp thorns allow this strike weapon to induce bleeding. So this was the weapon of Petrus of Thorland, if I recall correctly. And this was used by either Vince or Nico. I think it was Nico. But it's also just a cleric weapon more generally. So that is a crescent-shaped halberd resembling a long-handled battle axe, traditionally wielded by way of white clerics. Next we have the Canvas Talisman, medium for casting miracles of the gods. Canvas talismans are austere items carried by heralds. Equip a talisman or a sacred chime to cast miracles. Miracles must be attuned at a bonfire before use. And so there's one word there that would be perfect for fun with definitions. And that is austere, which is an adjective, or as an adjective, refers to severe or strict in manner, attitude, or appearance. So Canvas talismans are austere items carried by heralds. Of living conditions or a way of life, having no comforts or luxuries, harsh or ascetic. Having an extremely plain and simple style or appearance, unadorned. So yeah, that makes sense because it is kind of an ugly talisman, but I seem to recall in Dark Souls 1 that the Canvas talisman had one of the best magic adjust ratios, which in this one, spell buff 60. But that doesn't seem to be true in this game anymore if you look at the spell buff. But again, I'm not especially knowledgeable of how casting works in this game in general. So I don't think we read this in the previous episode, but we have Sage's Big Hat. Enormous hat that completely obscures the face. Belonged to twin gurus known as the Crystal Sages. The pair are said to be successors to the great sage Logan, and this big hat is a symbol of their pedigree. So yeah, we definitely didn't read that, but that's, very interesting, especially in light of the conversations we had in the previous episode. We also got Lloyd's Shield Ring. Ring given to Knights of the Way of White. Depicts Allfather Lloyd's Shield of Caste. Boosts damage absorption when HP is full. Much time has passed since the worship of Lloyd was common in the Way of White. The clerics of Karim had always strongly asserted that Lloyd was a derivative fraud, and that the Allfather title was self-proclaimed. So yeah, I think that's about it for the stuff we just picked up.
Ashen One, be sure to bring more souls.
Yes, you greedy, greedy guts. Okay, off to the cathedral.
Merciful goddess, mother of the forlorn, who have no place to call their own, please bear witness to our resolve. Fire for Ariandel. Fire for Ariandel. And the ash to kindle flame.
Are you done? We gotta try not to die too many times, because otherwise we're gonna have to listen to that every single time we spawn. So this is very curious here, in that a bunch of boxes here that were already broken? Or is this... No, they're very clearly boxes. If you see right here where the tip of my sword is, Yeah, that looks very much like a box. I was thinking maybe it was a coffin or something. Because as we're going through this area, and you see there's actually boxes broken all over the place here, which is very interesting. But what I've been thinking is that, yeah, as we're going through the area, we should try to look for clues as to the... Whoa, speaking of clues. Whoa, I've never noticed that before. Wow. So, the deep is obviously going to be one of the main topics of discussion in this place. That looks a lot like the stuff in Aldrich's boss room, but a little bit different at the same time. Like, you can see, I'm going to presume that it wasn't just a modeling error or something, because you can see that it's not... Whoa, and even these roots here. So I don't know if those are existing roots that were covered in this deep... I keep calling it deep juice, deep slime. But no, but you can very, very clearly see that, yeah, the deep is lurking under the surface of this entire place. And yeah, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I never noticed this before. But again, in keeping with the things that we discussed in the previous episode, that this game in many ways, and this is especially true of this area, that this game encourages the player more than any of the previous Souls games to just run through areas, and this area is, as we'll see, a very poignant example of that, especially in the graveyard section. And wow, this is just mesmerizing, because you can actually see whatever it is sort of like enveloping, encasing these roots here. But yeah, returning to what I was saying, that another thing for us to keep in mind, other than looking for signs of the deep and its influence, is evidence of the travels of Anri and Horace. And so, if we are looking for that, and if Anri and Horace are, you know, unkindled like the player, which I think it's pretty obvious that they are, given that we find both of their summon signs here, even though I've wavered on that point in the past, but on the basis of comments left by everyone, I'm pretty solidly in the camp that sees them both as unkindled. If for no other reason than the fact that we can summon them when we use an Ember, and the item description for the Ember states that with the strength of fire, the summoning signs of unkindled become visible. So yeah, so they're unkindled. And insofar as most unkindled, most player characters in the Souls games destroy boxes when they come to them, then yeah, it's not a huge leap to suggest that Anri and Horace were once here and decided that they would roll their way through all the boxes. But it's curious that they would roll their way through all the boxes, but not the chairs. So, I don't know. And that is absolutely fascinating to me. Okay. 5 minutes later, we're finally going to pick up this item, which is just a notched whip. So yeah, so maybe they were rolling through, they found the item, and they were just like, yeah, we don't need a notched whip because we got swords. Notched whip, a whip with thorny spikes that shred skin, causing heavy bleeding. The cleansing chapel uses whips such as these in order to produce the drops and puddles to wipe clean during its rituals. So I don't know under which regime, I don't know which regime that is referring to. And even though, you know, I've pointed this out several different points before, as JSF and Cassidov first pointed out to me, not to me directly, but in their discussing Dark Souls 3, that yeah, there's a statue of Vel'Kobai here, which is what Slave Knight Gale appears to be praying to. But yeah, again, we're leaving that until much later in the playthrough. I've not yet decided whether we're going to wait until the second DLC before we do the first one. I'm thinking now that we will, but also that it probably won't be necessary given the pace of this series and the fact that, yeah, I'm writing a dissertation, so we'll probably just get to it whenever it feels most natural within the context of the playthrough, but I suspect that that will be after the second DLC has been released. So here we actually have two paths. We can go up, or we can go through here. This second one is sort of a shortcut in a way, but it's also a place I never actually realized that was there until, like, oh, someone just died. Until my 5th or 6th playthrough of the game. And so yeah, like I was mentioning, this place is one of the worst when it comes encouraging people to run through it and maybe not to notice cool things that you might have otherwise noticed. And I just paused right there because there was some black gunk floating through the air that I don't know if I've ever seen before. And one of the reasons when I say that the game encourages you to just run through, one of the reasons for that should be fairly obvious here is that I'm reasonably certain these guys respawn infinitely, or that there's just an infinite number of dead bodies under here waiting to rise. And they are weak to fire just like normal hollows, so yeah. I would like to know what it is that is causing them to all rise simultaneously, though. Okay, so I'm gonna try a couple of slow motion shots here to see if we can figure out what's going on here. So when they die, they just disappear normally, but I want to see what it looks like. I want to get a good shot of what it looks like when they spawn out of the ground. Because I've been thinking that maybe it has something to do with the deep. But everything we've seen of the deep isn't just a black smoke color, which is what we see when these guys rise out of the ground. The deep is more of a dark purple, dark blue, dark purple, gooey substance. But this just looks like, it just looks like a steamy shadow, if that makes any sense. And when they die, they use the normal death animation of the corpse disappearing. So yeah, again, this is one of those areas where the game really itself encourages running through because, like, I've just been focused on trying not to get surrounded by these guys instead of actually talking in depth about the lore, so let's try and do that a little bit more. So this graveyard, is here for one reason specifically, a very obvious and specific reason for this graveyard being here, and that is, I think, to give us a clue as to the origins of Anri and Horace. No, no. Okay, I'm just realizing now one thing I didn't do, which I really ought to have, is look up enemy names for this area. Because I want to be able to refer to these guys by their actual names. You can see, obviously, that they spit out maggot-type things. Stop it, friends! I don't know who would have been buried here and why, but if we're to assume, which I don't think you really need to assume, I think it's in the text of the game itself, that this place was once a cathedral dedicated to the worship of the Way of White. Then, presumably, this is a graveyard for members of the faith. And if we're to look at this and look for some sort of lore explanation, for the fact that they respawn seemingly non-stop, if there is a lore thing for that and it's not just a gameplay thing, then perhaps it shows the extent. Oh, whoa, look at this grave here. Perhaps it shows the extent of the following the Way of White had. Wow, that is really, really creepy. So yeah, this is one of those instances where the connections between the deep and the abyss seem much more plausible, in that okay, I don't want to say anything, but we appear to have found a peaceful spot. Probably shouldn't have said anything there, but yeah. This reminds me a lot of the sort of abyssal pustules that pop out of the ground and that are all over the Royal Wood in the Artorias of the Abyss DLC in Dark Souls 1. But unlike those ones, we can't... Those ones, if we hit those things, they sort of explode, and a bunch of what is sort of, I guess, abyssal water vapor just sort of floats into the air, and then that's that. But these we can't interact with at all. Oh, you drink a little bit too much there, friend? It's okay. Oh no! You tried using Tums or something?
I don't like Tums. It makes my stomach even worse.
Oh no! Oh, that's... I feel bad for whoever's gonna have to clean that up.
It'll probably be me anyway.
Well, I'm very sorry about that, friend. Just, maybe try to lay off the liquor a little bit tonight?
Yeah, but what's the point of living then?
Is he just gonna slowly vomit towards us?
Oh, excuse me, I almost puked on you there. You better watch out because I'm getting closer. Oh, there goes my lunch. I should have listened to Bill. I shouldn't have eaten before swimming.
Oh, man. Oh, he's facing us now. Oh, no. Oh, friend. So yeah, much like the hollows as well as the mighty pus of men. These enemies are very, very weak to fire. And this is intriguing. What are you doing there, friend? Okay, this is gonna sound crazy, and it probably is, and it's a big time stretch. But remember in Bloodborne, Let's Talk Lore, when, oh no, there's a stop motion enemy coming after me. In Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore, when we went to Yosefka's clinic, and I pointed to the animations that the various Celestials were using, their idle animations, and pointed out that they were unique animations for those, you know, for Celestials, that you don't see anywhere else in the game, and that in some way, shape, or form, they probably reflected an intentional choice by FromSoft to convey something. Friend, you're standing right in the way. I'm trying. Okay, thank you. There you go. So yeah, in that case, everyone said that no, it's just a normal idle animation. In the case of the afflicted beggar. Oh. Stop it. I'm trying to talk to the viewers here. We're trying to have a conversation. I'm trying to show off your friend as well. But yeah, everyone said, no, I think it's just a normal idle animation for the afflicted beggar. Whereas I said, it looks like he's looking at his hands and trying to figure out what the heck happened to him. Why is it that he, up until that point, could control his transformation, but then all of a sudden he can't? He's just this blue thing. And everyone said I was crazy, but then when we went back and we looked at it again, I showed through side by side that it was very clearly, the animations were very clearly intended to have something to do with the characters who were doing the animation. So that was one thing, and this is, I think, an even bigger stretch than that. But what if this... It looks like he's wearing a diaper, just the way his butt looks. Okay, I'm gonna grab my guide so that I actually have the enemy names. Okay, enemy names for the Cathedral of the Deep. These guys are called reanimated... This is a reanimated corpse. And then the ones that have the sort of second part growing out of them, the ones that are like sort of minotaurish, are called infested corpse. I'm going to presume the ones with the bident in their tail are called corpse grub. And then there's Starved Hound, Devout of the Deep, Devout Bombers, so presumably the one who greeted us when we neared Cleansing Chapel, where they stab themselves with fire and then sort of come after you. There's Cathedral Gravewarden, Ravenous Crystal Lizard, Writhing Rotten Flesh. Oh, I know, that's those blob type enemies that we found in Dark Souls 1 as well. But they're a little bit different in this one. Knight of the Deep, Deep Accursed, Giant Slave, Deacon of the Deep, Cathedral Evangelist, Mimic, Mangrub, Deacons of the Deep. So, yeah, a lot of enemy names there to process, but this one, very obviously, just a reanimated corpse. So to finally get to my point, what if this reanimated corpse is mimicking the digging motion that it saw Anri and Horace doing? Either that, or what if this reanimated corpse is responsible for in some way, shape, or form for having dug up this body? So that does not seem all that implausible to me, especially when you look at the corpse model. Which, yeah, corpse models can be very problematic, but this one is very clearly clipping into the ground. So, for one reason or another, this reanimated corpse seems to have, yeah, dug up this body. Containing the Astora greatsword. And yeah, it doesn't seem interested at all in the item, or me, even though we're just standing right in front of it. Because yeah, you can see very clearly that the corpse was just sort of dug out of the ground. So that's very, very interesting. Okay. So we got the Astora greatsword. This greatsword, bestowed only upon elite knights, is a relic of the ruined land of Astora. Designed for a focus on thrust attacks, this sword is hard and sharp, but not unusually heavy. So... if we were to assume that Anri found her elite knight set somewhere in this graveyard, but opted for the light weapon over the heavy one, then yeah, I think that makes a fair bit of sense. That, you know, we find this greatsword here, and either she came upon it or she didn't. Whether she did or didn't, like, you know, you could come up with a series of events that are plausible either way. If she did, she already had her, you know, Anri straight sword, and that was fine, so she didn't need another one. But if she didn't, then yeah, maybe it was just this guy who, for whatever reason, very intent on digging with his hands. So that's a cool little touch, and one, again, that I've never noticed because I usually just run right through this area. So much so that I don't have the slightest clue where we're going. But there's another clue here as to the apparent escape trajectory, I guess, of Anri and Horace, where they escaped Aldrich, who was at the Cathedral of the Deep, and then came here and either dug up or looted items from a grave that was already dug up by one of these reanimated corpses. Friends, can you tell me where the grave is that I need to find with all the items? Is it over here? So I can't tell. Oh, I finally got regain to work. I was wondering what that animation was. Or what that so watch around my character. I'll get rid of my so that you can see it. And you can see that my health just regen. So I think you need, the first time I used it, I don't know, maybe it was bugged or something. I remember the first time I used it thinking that it wasn't working at all. The Pontiff's Eye Ring, I think it is. And it might not work when we have full HP, but... so that is actually moderately useful. Cool, okay. We're gonna stop messing with these guys and their silly infinite respawns, and we are going to find the thing we're looking for, but I fear we're just running in circles because I think this is the entrance. That is the entrance. Because again, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record at this point, but hard to properly orient yourself when you're constantly having to deal with enemies hounding you. Okay, I think that drop down point may be where we need to go. So let's check it out. Sorry, friends. Okay, what about this one? Is this one doing the same animation, I wonder? It's really hard to tell because his arms are clipping through the geometry. Which I guess makes sense, like, or maybe not. Like, it would make sense if he was, like, digging through the dirt, but that looks like a giant rock that he's just clipping his arms through. So no, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Friends, I'm looking for... I think it's an Executioner Greatsword? Can you help me? There we are, okay. We found it. These ones are all lying in the fetal position. I'm sorry, friends. I'm torn in terms of thumbnails. This could make a good thumbnail right here. You know, because you obviously want thumbnails that are eye-catching, but at the same time, you don't want, you know, I don't like clickbaity thumbnails, and I like thumbnails that, at least to some degree, describe the episode. Or that, you know, depict something important in the context of the episode that it's being used for. So, Fading Soul and Executioner's Greatsword. Okay, time to get out of here. Friends, stop it. Stop. No. No. I think the blue tearstone saved our life again there. That was not cool. Okay, we're gonna get out of here before we read the Executioner's Greatsword item description. Gosh, it's so easy to get disoriented there. Can you parry these things? It was a partial parry at least. And so you can see that, yeah. There are some creepy crawlies on us. I don't know enough about that type of thing to say what type of bugs those are. Or I don't even know if bugs is probably not insects, maybe the right way to describe them. Parasites? Because they look like leeches. So yes, I would appreciate any clarification on that can be offered. That looks like it could be a white birch tree that has been chopped down. But I could be wrong about that. Why is our life flashing? So yeah, this is something I would like to try and use a little bit more, the auto-hide HUD. So I figured this episode would be a good time to test that out, but it's also very weird for me, hard to get used to. Because I like to have all the information I need right there. So these things, you can see, well, not right now because it's clipping through the floor, but they're tails. Have a saint's bident embedded in them. This is pointless. Okay. Guys, stop respawning, please. You're getting really annoying. Get wrecked. So yeah, these are not among my favorite enemies. But certainly very interesting from a lore perspective. There are no red eyes here, of course, but I do wonder to what extent, or whether this might have, you know, something to do with the whole notion of impurity, or how, just more generally speaking, do these things even get here? And why do they have tails that consist of one of the weapons that we find in this area? So all very good questions that I would like to at least try and answer by the time we're done with the next episode. Can you parry these guys? No, don't puke on me. Maybe I'm just really bad at parrying all this time. You gonna puke now? So it has left hook, right hook, headbutt, and then puke. Oh, no. Mixing up the pattern now. Alright. Let's just stop it, please. Okay, let's move on, because otherwise we're never going to open up the shortcuts. And you can see here what, or at least we did just see there, what sort of freaked me out when I first came into this area. And that is, it was a crow flying by, and then I was wondering what the black particle effects were in the air, and it was obviously a crow flying away, and for whatever reason, shedding some feathers along the way, so... We have what looks like a beautiful sunset here. Oh, come on. Give me no opportunity to admire the sunset. At least this will give us a good view of the respawn. Finally. Or not. You just respawn when we're standing on it? I don't get it at all. But yeah, you get a beautiful view of the sunset here, or at least what appears to be a sunset. And given what happens later in the game, and given the precedent from Anri and Horace in Dark Souls 1, it's not... Stop it! It's not entirely unreasonable to assume that this is not the real sun. And some faraway lands that look just like there's some green there. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not fully oriented properly here. Okay, we got a few items to get here, but first let's open up the shortcut and go say hello to some of the infested corpses, I think they're called. Oh, and we also have the Curse Ward Great Shield, which belonged, of course, in Dark Souls 2 to the Pursuer. One of the really, really great changes, or one of the really, really great enemies in Scholar of the First Sin, especially when compared to the original game. And again, yeah. And I'm very curious to hear if I'm alone with this, because it's certainly not something I ever noticed. That the deep is just, like, consuming the lands, consuming the buildings. Whether man-made or not, these things are just, yeah. That is fascinating. So back at the obelisk, where we would have picked up the Estus shard had I not done it in the previous episode. And I said I didn't know this was how this was like a shortcut. It was this spot here that I was referring to. So you would drop down here and then go up the ladder. I'm really fascinated by... I hate them, don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of these enemies from a gameplay perspective, but they really are fascinating from a lore perspective. And we're already almost out of fire arrows. Get wrecked. Although I guess, having killed them all now, there's really no chance for us to look at the Bident, so hopefully I will have gotten a good slow motion shot of that earlier. The Bident that they have in their tails. And so again, this looks like it could be, but I don't think it's wide enough. Like it could be a white birch tree, but yeah, it doesn't look nearly wide enough. Oh no, never mind. It's a saint tree. That makes sense. Okay. Sacred chime for casting miracles of the gods. A bell vine cut from a small saint tree that has been meticulously tended to. Saint tree bell vines are customary in the far north and allow for faster casting than ordinary sacred chimes. I know that this item was in Dark Souls 2 and not in Dark Souls 1, but I can't recall what the story was behind this in Dark Souls 2, beyond the fact that I'm reasonably certain that, at least in Scholar of the First Sin, that we find this in the pit in Majula, behind a door that is locked until we get a key from Brightstone Cove Seldora. But yeah, I don't remember even what the item description read, but clearly this is a saint tree. That seems fairly obvious now that I've picked up the item. But yeah, I don't remember whether this item was associated in Dark Souls 2 with the Way of White or not. But yeah, that's interesting. I'm interested to hear if anyone else has any thoughts on that. I believe this is another Twinkling Titanite. Yep. I love the running R2 in this game. Like, it makes it so much, if for no other reason than it makes killing crystal lizards so much easier and more efficient. Ah, Titanite shard. Beautiful. Yeah, this is one thing that even though even though the Memetim kindly hooked us up with a bunch of souls and stuff, there are certain things in this game and playthrough that, yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a whole lot of souls if you don't have access to buying things like Titanite shards, and it's I wonder if it does that on purpose. You sneaky bugger, that crystal lizard, wow. I think they just run away from you. But I was not expecting having to fight this thing right this second. Although we can definitely use the Titanite scale to power up our Hollow Slayer Greatsword. So that works quite well. Although I think we need 2 for the next level, so the next one we're going to have to get from inside Firelink Keep. From right inside where the emergency exit is that we saw in episode 8. So I believe that's the, it's not the blood bite ring, because we already have that, but I think it is one of the bite rings, although I could be remembering that completely wrong. Firebomb's so useful. Poison bite ring, so it is one of the bite rings. But why the poison bite ring? And so again, to complete my thought, if I didn't actually complete it earlier, because I'm not sure if I did or not, but yeah, curious that the cathedral also, you know, all around the cathedral, that there would be graves everywhere. So we have a few item descriptions to read. Greatsword of a debauched executioner used for beheadings. This sword retains a keen memory of its executioner's duty and absorbs FP from each fallen foe. So in the area where we found this, we found a fading soul. So we found 2 corpses there, one with the executioner's greatsword, one with a fading soul. So... And then we also found a 3rd corpse containing the Astora greatsword. So we can assume, perhaps, that the corpse containing the Elite Knight set also had the Astora greatsword and what is now known as Anri's greatsword, but may have been the name, based on the item description, is the name of another hero, another Astora hero. Perhaps Aegon of Astora, who knows? Time's convoluted, But yeah, so we can assume that that one corpse had Astora stuff on it, and that Anri, given the choice between the 2 swords, because I guess she's still playing Demon Souls and doesn't have, you know, there's an item burden, I guess, but she picked the Anri Straight Sword, what we now know as the Anri Straight Sword, over the Astora Greatsword. This greatsword, bestowed only upon elite knights, is a relic of the ruined land of Astora. This is the first inclination, I think. No. We've actually learned in the High Wall that Astora is a ruined land. So reinforcing that Astora doesn't exist anymore. But based on who the Unkindled are, it's not entirely beyond the realm of possibility that Anri is, in fact, from Astora, because, you know, much like the likes of Sigurd, she might have been dead for a long time and then rose as an Unkindled. So it's not mutually exclusive to say that she's from Astora and that that Astora is now ruined, because she could have been dead for many centuries, or, you know, if that sort of timescale even has any meaning in this game, which I'm not so sure that it does, but yeah, it's entirely possible that she's from Astora, but it's also possible, given the evidence that we found here, that she is not. And, you know, the item descriptions later in the game do seem to hint more towards the latter than they do the former, but yeah. And we have more of these plants here that look like weed plants, at least to me, but I'm not sure. I'm really not. But yeah, so I don't know, like the minutia of trying to figure out the logical ordering of the 3 corpses, what they took, what they didn't, is unclear to me. because Horace uses what I think is, or was in Dark Souls 2 at least, a Llewellyn shield, which makes sense if they escape from the Cathedral of the Deep, because we do find a Llewellyn set in sort of like the pool of dregs near the boss room. Because yeah, he also just uses a halberd. So if he really liked the halberd, then, you know, and he has the weapon already, it makes sense that he would take the halberd, leave the Executioner's Greatsword if he didn't want to use it. But as we'll learn later, it says that, you know, he took a liking to the cold and bulky insides of the Executioner set. So, again, I don't know. I'm just mostly just saying things out loud, thinking out loud, and hopefully together we can come up with a more sort of plausible, series of events. This is, of course, where we will find Siegfried later on. I think the trigger for that... And again, more broken boxes here. That is very strange. I don't know that... There are a lot of areas in the Souls games where there are destructible objects that are already destroyed by the time we get to them. So that is, I think, very curious. This is also the area where we find patches. Spoiler warning. So it's not entirely unreasonable to suggest not only that maybe it was patches looting for, you know, looking for loot, but also I wonder, given the placement of the Paladin ashes, that on the one hand it's entirely possible that I think this is supposed to be a representation of Osiris, but I could be wrong about that. Because it's a very similar face to that which we find in the gargoyles later in the game, but yeah, again, another thing I've never noticed because I'm usually just running through this area. And now I lost my train of thought. Okay, sorry, I'm sure I'll return to that later, once I remember, but for now, we've not yet read the Curse Word Great Shield. Great Shield given to those who resisted the curse long ago. Far too heavy for an ordinary weapon, perhaps it signifies the foolishness of resisting the curse. And yet those who bear the weight of this shield will not find its protections against curses wanting. So I don't know what that means, will not find its protection against curses wanting, because as best as I can tell, there's no curse resist stat. There is, it does have 75% resistance against dark, which includes deep as well as abyss. Degree to which dark damage is reduced when guarding, so that doesn't really tell us anything. Okay. Gosh, there was something I was just saying, and then I got distracted by this gargoyle here, and that's going to drive me nuts. Oh yeah, about patches. That we find the Paladin set underneath a fallen knight. And there's really no evidence to support this in the game other than, you know, just knowing the character Patches. But I wonder if Patches had anything to do with that. That maybe the Brigand and the Fallen Knight we find were in cahoots with him, because, you know, the fact that we find a Paladin set. Let's see, because, yeah, the Fallen Knight we fought... Oh, hello! That was actually really close. So yeah, so when we find the Paladin set, it's being guarded by someone wearing the armor we're wearing now. Armor of an order of fallen knights who disbanded and fled, but met untimely deaths. The drab, tattered cloth conceals tough black metal, which provides dependable protection from fire. It is just possible to make out the majestic gold engravings on its surface. So I'm trying to think if this looks like an armor from Dark Souls 1 or 2, but just with something... but with drab, tattered cloth concealing it. But nothing comes to mind. The helmet almost looks like a Drakeblood helmet, but I don't know that it actually had any gold engravings on it. So yeah, I don't know. Aww. Worthy of note that the pattern on their chest appears very similar to that which we find on the chest of hollows. So our hollowing hasn't really taken hold yet, so you can't really see it. Other than some black stuff, which I presume is meant to be blood, but it's very low quality texture, so I can't really tell. Oh, and you can actually get a closer look at the engravings here. So that just looks like a pattern. For a second I thought I saw kanji there, but I think I'm wrong. But that's very interesting. Again, more broken stuff. So I don't know, maybe that's just a hint that patch is this year? Lots of questions and not many answers in this episode, I'm afraid. But that's, you know, we should all be used to that by now.
I have any time.
Oh! You certainly do, friend! Thank you, it's been a long time!
I have any time.
You certainly do help anytime. How long has it been? Has it been like 3 weeks or something?
I have any time.
Really?
I have.
Has it been that long? It's been like 2 months?
I have any time.
Well, you do help. You were very helpful, friend.
I have.
Yeah. Anytime I've needed help.
Any time.
Except for the times when I'm not near the trees. Yep. To be perfectly honest, I completely forgot about our friend. And friend, you're hitting the corner of the... His aim isn't the best.
I have any time.
You really do, friend. You are the best. I really do appreciate it. So how are your holidays going?
I have any time.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of awkward. I really don't give you much time off, do I? So what have you been doing for the last 2 months since we last saw you in the series?
I have any time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You've been helping other players. Well, that's very nice.
I have any time.
Yeah, you really do. Except if they don't... Like, what do you do if someone doesn't pick the white tree branch as their starting gift?
Who are you? I have any time.
You do ask them who they are, but yeah, Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Alright, well, I am really sorry that you don't get all that much time off because you're helping everyone anytime, but, you know, I hope you know how much everyone appreciates it.
I help anytime.
Okay, friend. We will talk to you later. So yeah, another...
I help anytime.
Yes, you do. You really do. Another, white birch tree. And just like the other ones, the other two in the game, so one of which we've already been to in the Undead Settlement, and this is our second, and the third one we'll find in the swamp, in Firelink Keep, the lower swamp, that is. And if you've made friends with him, or if you picked the starting gift,
I help anytime.
you certainly do, friend. Again, thank you. I feel we're getting... I guess you don't really have all that much of a vocabulary. I can't hold it against you, but yeah. So this does seem to be a more generic... So, you know, the example I raised from Bloodborne, those were all very specific animations. This does seem to be a generic animation, but still, it could have been meant in that one instance to indicate that, yeah, that it was trying to dig into the ground. This one's doing it on some rocks, but again, there's not a whole lot of cognitive processing going on there, I guess. Okay, we picked up a bunch of items, and I wasn't really paying attention to what we picked up, but... And again, more broken stuff, so maybe it's just meant to indicate just, yeah, an advanced state of disrepair that this entire place is in. I don't really know. Certainly you can see that he's been helping any time for a lot of players here, judging by the arrows. Which, if you are just sort of going through this area for the first time and you don't have him on your side yet, is a nice environmental way of saying, watch out for the dude with the giant great bow.
I help anytime.
You really do. Well, thank you, friend, and I'm sorry that you don't really have much of a holiday, because you're so busy helping everyone anytime. But yeah, I hope you know how much everyone appreciates it. Myself included. So yeah, so that over there is the Undead Settlement. So we've oriented ourselves a little bit better now, thanks to I Help Anytime. But there really doesn't appear to be anything over there, except unless that's the Farron Woods. Darkroot Forest or whatever, but... And more of these statues. I actually think I have noticed these statues previously. But yeah, it's very curious. Are they supposed to be angels or gargoyles? I'm gonna go with gargoyles. More of these statues. Which is curious that those haven't, because we find statues that are covered up all over the place, but not there for some reason. And yeah, once again, we can see the deep writhing under the surface of the stone here. A rusted coin. This is another Allfather Lloyd reference. An old rusted copper coin. Crushing the coin boosts item discovery. Those who have lost their fortunes rely upon this superstitious practice, hoping to retrieve what was once theirs, and more. Depicting what looks like an angel on the coin. Perhaps, again, a reference to Velka, I don't know. Or perhaps even more implausibly, Lady Elfrida, but that's a whole other thing. Look at this. I feel like half of you are going to be laughing, going, how did you not notice this before? But honestly, I have not noticed that before, so shoot me if, or sue me if that's really offensive to you. I apologize. Red bug pellet. Medicinal pellet made from crushed insects. The red type temporarily boosts fire damage absorption. Prepared in the Cathedral of the Deep by evangelists who dole them out to followers to ease their suffering when they burn. So yeah, this is another area with just ambush after ambush. So we're going to try and manage these as carefully as we can. Okay, these ones aren't weak to fire, which is curious. One of my favorite things about that enemy is during my blind playthrough of the game, when I finally made my way up to that spot, right behind that enemy is a note, or was a note that said, "Revenge." I was like, yep. So curious that these ones aren't mechanically weak to fire, even though they're the ones who stab themselves. That one was a little bit overzealous, I guess. Well, effort is half the battle, friend. You see this guy who follows you if you're not paying attention. You see, based on these, like, I don't even know what to call these. They're like giant nails or pegs or something. That these things were not meant to be walked on. This was not originally a path. So similar, I guess, to Canehurst, in that in Canehurst, the path that we take to Martyr Logarius, the Martyr Logarius boss fight, isn't an actual path. It's an improvised path. We climb along the roofs and stuff, and it's very similar here. And note also, as we looked at earlier in the episode, these chains actually do look very similar to those that we find on the undead... Oh, we didn't buy any, silly me. On the undead hunter charm, and that we also find later in the boss room for the cathedral, or for the Deacons of the Deep. We also have an incense burner, or what looks like an incense burner, hanging there. More chains down there. So I can only assume that other than, because obviously they're serving the function here of being the thing on which you can hang these incense burners, if indeed these are incense burners. But beyond that, given that we find 2 giants in this area, and the guide explicitly names them as slave giants, then it doesn't seem entirely unreasonable to suggest that one of the purposes of these chains were probably to restrain the giants that were being used here as slaves. So many ambushes in this area, it's ridiculous. Well, what are you hanging on there, friend? That's some hard cloth, if you're... yeah. And yeah, the chains and the slavery link is further reinforced by the thrall's clothing. We can see that, yeah, they have chains hanging from their necks. If the ragdoll cooperates with us here, that is. Stop it. Yep. Oh, is that? That looks like one of the shortcuts. But I'm not going to take the risk, especially I did want to equip the, was it Hush? One of the spells we bought from Orbeck, the one that reduces falling damage as well as soft, like, mask your noise when you're running. So that would have been a good spot to test it out, but because if so, like, I shouldn't be looking, especially in this playthrough of all things, for more reasons to run through the areas, but that is one possibility there, that you might be able to open up the shortcut by just going over here. God. It makes sense given the enemy type and what these enemies are, but their fighting style is so frustrating sometimes. You can also drop down to the spot that's a little bit higher than that, where the evangelist is sort of holding a service. So right over here. That's, if I do drop off, that's usually where I drop off, and then I run here and then down there and through the door on the other side, using iframes all along. But yeah. It'd be nice if we could, because that would be another interesting thumbnail. If we could somehow do that without aggroing them, which is very difficult to do. Oh. I thought I was so smart there, preventing the ambush, forgetting that there were actually 2 thralls there. Don't mind me, I just want to join the service. If you don't mind, Mrs. Evangelist. Yes, it worked. Oh, I guess your life bar flashes if you need to heal. Oh, come on. Okay, scratch what I said earlier. I think this is going to be the thumbnail. But with that said, there have also been many times where I've said in the middle of the episode, oh yeah, this is going to be a thumbnail, and then I see something else where I'm just like, oh no, actually that would make a much better thumbnail. So yeah, if it wasn't already obvious at this point from all the item descriptions and everything, that obviously the evangelists are very much in charge around here. They're middle managers, I guess you could say. And I'm not sure, I can't remember what the item is that's there, but we only have 1 Estus. So this should be interesting. Oh, you can't even target these ones. At least until they aggro. Oh no! Oh, those iframes. Come on, herder. Yes! Wow, that was cool. Okay, this is not good. We're out of Estus now. stay right there. I thought we were in big trouble there. And I'm pretty sure the item is nothing that we need, and we've probably already read the item description for it. Yep, Undead Hunter Charm. So at least, yeah, we have it now, and we can see the chains again. So perhaps that's just meant to signify the shackles. Oh, I hate that delayed attack so much. Alright. So yeah, we've still got no Estus. And I don't think we purchased... Oh, I meant to purchase the Divine Blessing that Grey Rat had, but... Had I done so, I probably would have traded it to the Crow anyway, because I believe we would have gotten a carving out of that, so... Either way. Because, yeah, there's still a few ambushes here. Again, another of those areas where the game very much encourages you to just run through, because... It's hard, and we've gotten Estus from a number of... From having killed a number of enemies, which again, I think is completely random, but... But yeah, the fact that we're still sort of struggling to get through here, even though we went out of our way to get additional Estus, is pretty crazy. I think once you're inside the cathedral, it's not too bad because of how the shortcuts are set up, but this is certainly not an easy area, at least the first half of it. Granted, you can go as far as the entrance to Irithyll until you actually come here, until you're actually forced to come here, because you need the doll in order to gain access to Irithyll, but... So you could come here with a fair bit more Estus than we currently have, but... I don't think these guys are weak to fire either, are they? Nope. I guess that's why they're Grave Wardens. They have one attack that I can parry pretty reliably, but if they don't use that attack, then I'm pretty much screwed. He used the attack and we were almost screwed anyway. So I've always been intrigued by this spot here. Because there's a big dirt square in the middle for some reason, like a sandbox. But it does look like the type of place where royalty would come and sit and, you know, have a chat or something. And it's hard to say what, you know, the people in the upper echelons of the church would be, of the Way of White, would be looking at from here, because the landscape in front of us isn't necessarily the way it would have been at the time when royalty or, you know, the upper echelons of the church would actually sit here and look at things, or just, you know, enjoy. Where did you guys come from? Certainly not if they're having to deal with those guys. Interrupt their nice, quiet view of the extremely ghetto undead settlement. Unless, you know, maybe it was there, and maybe they just enjoyed looking at the place where all this stuff comes from that keeps them going, the sacrifices that travel along the road of sacrifices. But again, judging by the landscape, you can see how everything's just sort of jutting out. Like, that does not look like a normal cliff face, at least insofar as I can recognize what a normal cliff face looks like, and that FromSoft would have purposely made that look like it popped out of the ground, which I think they did, judging by the high wall. But anyways, I'm just lathering on now, and we have almost no HP, so this part should be interesting. I'm tempted to just use the iframes on the door. I'm going to assume we can't access that part there, but I could be wrong. I think we're just going to use the iframes on the door and then come back here. Oh, those two guys were the ones that would have... Because I'm used to opening this door and having those two guys kill themselves. Okay, we're going to go rest at the bonfire. And then come back here. My recording is at 1 hour and 44 minutes. Oh, shite. Suggesting, as we've stated numerous points in this playthrough, some sort of spiritual impurity. Awesome. Now, what is that? Because looks like the deep to me. Or at least, again, this is not something that I noticed myself. I feel like JSF, to some degree, everything I see in this playthrough, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't notice that myself. JSF and Cassidy have pointed it out. This is one case where that's very much true. JSF was on Bonfireside Chat with Gary Butterfield and Cole Ross when they were talking about the Cathedral of the Deep. And yeah, this was one of those spots where he pointed out that, yeah, this looks almost certainly to be the Deep. Or perhaps the Deep mixed with water of some sort, because this looks a fair bit less viscous. It seems to have less viscosity. I don't even know if that's the right word. Viscous, meaning like thick. Because this looks like a stream almost, but with like black gunk in it. And we do learn later that human dregs... Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to get into it for now. So, for the next episode, my plan is, if I've not already said this, because I think I might have, but for the next episode, our plan is to have both GSF and Cassidy on the show. But yeah, it might be difficult to figure out time zones and things like that, but that's my plan. So we're going to see can make that a thing. So we're going to send this back down now. Okay, that's very interesting because as I think it was Apex27 who pointed out in the previous episode, or 2 episodes ago, but we talked about the comment in the previous episode. So presumably that's why there's a poison bite ring there. But yeah, let me finish my thought first. As was pointed out in a comment, I believe it was by Apex27, that the Black Knight death sounds, as they were in Dark Souls 1 and as the Alon Knights used in Dark Souls 2, is used by the deacons, but not these ones. Because I was expecting to see the animation and hear the way that the Black Knights die, but either it's just the boss deacons, or it's the deacons that are specifically blue that we find in Irithyll. So I don't know, that's something we'll have to test, because yeah, I was expecting to hear that noise, and it was just the normal, you know, just the generic default corpse model disappearing animation. And so these things are a lot like the slime enemies that we had in Dark Souls 1, but they're a little bit different. Whereas the slime enemies in Dark Souls 1, I believe, if I recall correctly, they were just slime. Whereas these ones have a whole bunch of, you can see bones extruding from it. And its shape shifts, so like very similar to the blob enemies in Dark Souls 1, but... and it does also appear to have line of sight, which is curious, because we're standing behind it and it's not doing anything, but when we came from the other side, it was very clearly coming after us. So its line of sight is facing in that direction, and not towards us. Yeah, that's weird. Oh wait, I pointed out that one of the enemies earlier was a corpse grub, but that might actually be wrong. Actually, the guide has images of the enemies, I think, so let's... I'm gonna take a second to look this up. Oh no, so I was right. The corpse grub are the ones with the saints' bidents in their tails. And the guide explicitly describes those bugs as maggots, so I don't know... Again, I don't know the extent to which they've actually received this information directly from FromSoft or not, but I'm gonna assume that they did. So the Devout to the Deep are the ones that we found praying at the obelisk, where we picked up the Estus Flash Shard in the previous episode. The reanimated corpses are indeed the enemies I thought they were. Same with the Devout Bombers and the infested corpses. The Cathedral Grave Warden as well, and these ones are called Writhing Rotten Flesh. Okay, so that's very interesting. So that means that the enemies with the bidents in their tails were once man-grubs until they turned into corpses. Because something else that we'll see later on is that when we come across the man-grub casters, that the sort of arrows that they shoot at us are shaped like the bidents. So, you know, I don't know what any of that means beyond perhaps the fact that, you know, the grubs were, I don't know. Something for us to think about, certainly. So yeah, it very clearly has a line of sight, because when we were standing behind it, or its apparent behind, it couldn't see us and it wasn't attacking us. But now you can see, yeah, that it attacks by using whatever bones and things it has inside of itself. want to try and get a good view where it's not clipping through us. Yeah, it's hard to do though. And so these ones are, in fact, weak to fire. And they die in basically exactly the same way that the slime enemies in Dark Souls 1 did, so... So yeah, I don't know whether we're gonna go open up the next shortcut or not. Because yeah, there's so much stuff here that needs to be talked about that... So in returning to the conversation we had about whether or not corpse models disappearing, whether there's any lore to that. And you can see that this pool of whatever it is, and that's an open question, but something we'll talk about in the next episode, that it's very clearly moving. But yeah, in returning to the discussion we had about whether or not corpse models disappearing or not, whether there's any lore significance to those things. In some cases, it's very obviously a gameplay thing, because you don't want a corpse like that to be ragdolled. You really don't. So what I think we're going to do... What I think we're going to do is we're going to open the shortcut. And then we're going to head back to Firelink and deal with the comments. But I am going to leave the items because I think we're going to run through the entire area again in the next episode and talk about the things that we're seeing then. Now, hopefully I can remember which side the shortcut is on, because I can't really remember. And this might end in my death, which is fine if it does. There's an additional shortcut that we're not going to open just yet, but we will once again get to that in the next episode. But yes, so to finally finish my thought, the corpse of the giant disappearing is very obviously for a gameplay reason. That is, you can't have a model that size ragdolled in the game. Otherwise, you know, it would just cause chaos for the frame rate. And finally, we have a good shot of the bident. And you can see sort of the blood coursing through this maggot collective, I guess. We should open the shortcut before before it hits us. Ay, ay, ay. And so we have a shortcut leading back to the bonfire, as well as, it's not really a shortcut, but a door leading to an elevator which goes up. So we're not going to take the elevator yet, because that will screw up a quest line that we have yet to do in this area. And which, I'm at almost 2 hours of my recording. I'm thinking now maybe we should just run through to the other shortcut so that we can trigger the quest line. No. We'll save it. Okay. But you can't have a giant corpse like that ragdoll. So there are some instances where it obviously leans more heavily towards the gameplay side than it does the lore significant side in terms of the corpses, whether they ragdoll or disappear. And that is one such instance, I think, that you just can't have a corpse that size just ragdolling around in the A would be bad for performance, and B would look just really, really dumb. More so than, yeah, the corpse models ragdolling already do, so. So I'm reasonably certain the trigger for this is actually speaking with patches, which we've not yet done, so. But yeah, that's it, I think, for the first half of the cathedral. Provided that I didn't pick something up and not read the item description for, which I imagine I probably did, but I can't remember what we would have missed. So we already have the notch whip, which, if I didn't finish my thought earlier, I'm not sure whether or not this is something that was used by, say, the evangelists, or something that was used by the previous regime, by whoever was here from the Way of White. It's not unreasonable to suggest that it would be the evangelists because, of course, their weapon does cause bleed. And bleeding seems to be part of the whole, even though this seems to describe a different ritual, that the cleansing chapel uses whips such as these in order to produce the drops and puddles to wipe clean during its rituals. It sounds almost like, and again, speaking as someone who was raised Catholic but isn't anymore, because it looks like a crown of thorns. And like there's a weird sort of like fetish, and maybe that's not the right term to describe it, and I don't mean to offend anyone who, believes in this or is Catholic or Christian or whatever, but there's a weird fetish with the blood that he shed and, of the pain and the suffering that he endured for everyone's sins, supposedly. That really comes through in a movie like, Passion of the Christ, which is just a bloodbath. And it seems almost like there's something similar going on here. Or just, to use, I don't even know. I'm not even going to get into it because that's just so weird. But yeah, that's it for the Cathedral of the Deep for now, I think. Okay, so before we get to the comments, and it's now Wednesday the 21st of December, so about 24 hours after I started recording this episode. So we have a few more comments to work with, but even then we don't have enough time to get to all of the ones that are presently there. So if you left a comment and I did not read it, I sincerely apologize, as always. And I'm sorry as well if you were one of those people who maybe thought, yeah, it'll be 3 weeks till the next episode comes out, so I got some time to leave a comment. I wish I were more consistent in terms of my upload times, and I apologize for that. So if you fall in that camp, then I'm sorry to you as well. But without further ado, Jermaine Cameron writes, do you think it's possible that Irina and Aegon attempted to link the fire but failed? Assuming that Aegon is an unkindled, I could see Irina attempting to play the role of firekeeper and convincing Aegon to attempt to link the fire, and in failing to link the fire, Aegon dies and becomes unkindled, and Irina receives her injuries. So that's an interesting question and perspective, but I'm not sure how much evidence there is in the game to actually support that. Beyond one thing I will say, which is that as we established in the previous episode, Aegon is unkindled, which means that by definition, he attempted to link the fire and failed. Because yeah, that's the whole idea of unkindled, is that they were people or an amalgam of people, depending on if we want to consider Miyazaki's pre-release interviews to be canonical to the story. Then yeah, Aegon by definition failed to link the fire because he's an unkindled, just as the player character did. So yeah. Gustavo writes, I was watching one of your videos, I don't quite remember which one, but in it you discussed the restoration of Father Ariandel's painting, and I would like to share my interpretation of what restoration of the painting might mean. It's not uncommon for paintings to deteriorate and rot with time, especially if they're exposed to harsh conditions such as intense humidity and sunlight. When a painting is damaged though, it can be restored. I know little to nothing on this topic, but the American Institute for the Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works succinctly defines it as, quote, restoration is actually a type of conservation treatment. It specifically refers to an attempt to bring cultural property closer to its original appearance, end quote. Based on that, I understood that Ariamis's painting, or a painting that came after Ariamis's, was heavily damaged over the centuries and became uninhabitable. Father Ariandel was the one person who took it upon himself to restore it to its original state. And to do so, he used his blood as pigment because he was merely restoring the painting, filling in the blanks. Meanwhile, Arya, the painter girl, will use the dark soul of man as pigment because, for some reason, that's what's necessary to create a new painting. So yeah, that's very, very interesting, and I thank you sincerely, Gustavo, for bringing in this highly specific definition of restoration, because I think that's very helpful, and I thank you for bringing it up. One thing I do wonder about your comment, though, is you mentioned that the painter girl is named Aria, A-R-I-A, but I don't know where that's from, or if that's kind of like a Kalon situation where we referred to, or at least I referred to the fair lady as Kalon, but it's not canonically a name anywhere, but it's a name that makes sense. So I'm curious about that, the name of the painter, because I've just been referring to her as the painter. But yeah, thanks again. This is something that we'll certainly keep in mind as we come closer to exploring the painted world of Ariandel in this playthrough. Video poster writes, I think Logan's ruthlessness is explained by his discipline. Sorcery being based solely on the soul, which represents the mind, is an art form without base emotion, like empathy incorporated. Basic emotions, want, fear, empathy derive from darkness, hence the want that drives hollows and the base fear generated by Lucatil's sword in their mind. Pyromancy being a mix of soul and dark, in my view, a microcosm of the first flame, balances the cold academics of sorcery and the raw emotions of hexes. So that's very interesting. I'm not quite sure what to think about that, but certainly, yeah, it's a very, very interesting way of putting it. And just thinking about all the sorcerer assassins we see, if sorcery is the art of manipulating the soul, well, I guess they need a supply of souls to research on. Where to get them? Have assassins pluck them from their vessels. Yeah, again, well said and very interesting. So thank you, video poster. Candidate writes, Mitch talked about how Aegon and Kareem culture wouldn't approve of her becoming a firekeeper, but I don't see how becoming a firekeeper is an unorthodox route for a maiden, or looked ill upon by the way of white. How Petrus talks about Rhea in the Dingy set being just a dirty version of the Maiden set makes it seem like Maiden is simply the position you're put in before you become a firekeeper. And if firekeepers are looked ill upon, why is the statue that depicts either Emma or the Shrine Maid, both of whom are retired firekeepers, the most common in the game? The knights in the archives do use crystal magic weapon. I don't think it implies anything about the sage mass distributing spells, it's just that those knights sided with the archives in the Civil War. The description of divine blessing seems to be a little dubious. The word that's translated as revered is compared to in Japanese, and even more specifically comparing the two things that are not the same. So the English strongly implies that Guinevere is the queen, while the Japanese heavily implies that she isn't. Fantastic. Regarding what Mitch says about the Way of White's influence fading in Kareem, this doesn't seem to fit the description of the Kareem tome, which reads, a sacred braille tome from Kareem, filled with advanced miracles, In the Way of White, there's a tradition of placing great faith in the words of the blind, and Braille tomes are not unusual. It seems like the Way of White is the religion that dominates Kareem, it's just that the specific Kareem variant that now dominates doesn't and has never liked Lloyd. Cassidy writes in reply to Candidate, regarding maidens and firekeepers, I agree with you, Candidate. There's a larger narrative that all the Souls games have made into a trope, about the hypocrisy of religion and religion in general, as well as gender, but that might be a huge can of worms I'm unprepared to talk about at the moment. Bloodborne is centered on it, but even discounting Bloodborne as an outlier, this narrative stretches all the way back to Demon Souls, where it is also a central pillar of the story. For maidens and firekeepers in particular, consider the triumvirate of the crone, maiden, mother, and crone. A maiden is a woman, probably undead, that has been expelled / genially exiled, see also Rhea. Their mission in Dark 1 is centered around getting the rite of kindling, marrying a bonfire, and becoming a mother to humanity. Firekeepers have the little creatures that nibble at their flesh, etc. We only see the crone versions of the Firekeepers in Dark Souls 2, and it doesn't seem like they die instead in Dark Souls 3. In Dark 3, the Firekeeper has evolved to marry the one bonfire / champion that matters, Firelink Shrine. For Irina, her problem is one of timing, and this is probably why Aegon sees her as pitiable. She's doing everything right, but she's early, she's completely unneeded as a firekeeper. She's a soon-to-be mother of humanity without a bonfire, and that is why, in the end, in the so-called good path, she ends up in the graveyard bell tower, useless and waiting for death. Two mothers aren't needed with our firekeeper already in attendance. Again, the sometimes troubling things the franchise says about gender sneak around the corner. Regarding the Queen, for whatever it's worth, I never read the English item descriptions as strongly hinting that's Guinevere, and I kind of chalked that theory up as Reddit echo chambering that struck me a lot like Solaire equals Firstborn stuff. The Queen was revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, but she isn't Guinevere. She is much like Frida, being revered as Velka in the Painted World, a convenient imposter for the masses. The franchise really doesn't seem to like reusing past characters. In reply to Candidate as well, Mitch L. writes, don't forget the fact that Irina is frail and probably physically crippled to an extent. Maybe I didn't phrase it as best as I could have regarding the approval of becoming a firekeeper, but I stand by the opinion that a firekeeper is seen as a lesser position than a maiden or a learned miracle caster, seeing as firekeeper is just supposed to keep the flame. To any uninitiated or the small-minded like Aegon, I think it's exceedingly easy to understand why he would look down upon her, even while the rest of Kareem might not care that Irina is pursuing firekeeping. In reply to Mitch L., Cassidy writes, we have seen firekeepers cast miracles, actually, in the past, the Dark Moonitis of Anor Londo. So miracle casters and firekeepers aren't mutually exclusive, or that one couldn't be the other. Plus, if the beliefs of the Way of White converged into Kareem, then the beliefs regarding what led Anastasia of Astora to lose her tongue before being sent on her way is a factor. Also, the flame isn't just a flame. The flame is a symbol. It is the esoteric truth and the soul of the world. So being a firekeeper, especially in a world that now makes passion plays about them, see the item description for the Estus ring, is a big thing. Firekeeping is a vaulted position in Dark. It says firekeeping is a vaulted position, but I think Cassidy meant to say vaunted position? Firekeeping is a vaunted position in Dark 3, even more than in Dark Souls 1, but there isn't a hierarchy with the Mother, Maiden, Crone Triumvirate, just a procession of life. In reply to Cassidy, Mitchell writes, likewise we have seen disdain and malevolence towards firekeepers from others from Kareem. If they were so holy and venerated, Lautrec wouldn't be so enthusiastic in his mission to kill Anastasia, assuming that Fina belongs within the Way of White's polytheistic spectrum. As you said, it's an esoteric truth, and I'd wager that the act of firekeeping is seen to be just as esoteric in many parts of the world of Dark Souls. At least the Dark Moon Nidus could stand unassisted. And finally, in reply to Mitchell Cassidy writes, I think the big mistake a lot of people make is assigning or projecting modern morality onto the Way of White. For some, they assume that the Way of White was always wholly good, or at least on the side of the undead. It hasn't. It isn't. So just to add to that, a term that can be used to describe something like that is presentism. That you're looking you're looking at the past, and to a certain degree, presentism is unavoidable. It's sort of like the lower gameplay integration chart that, again, I've still not properly introduced, but it's very much like that in the sense that no matter how thoroughly one immerses oneself in the context of the historical period being examined, you are always going to be looking back on history or on, historical period pieces through a modern lens. But yeah, you need to sort of temper that with the context of the period that you're actually looking at. So yeah, that's presentism as simply as I can summarize it. And is another way of summarizing what Cassidiv is pointing out here. But returning to Cassidiv's comment, Dark One tells us that Lloyd's clerics used to hunt down undead, especially since they produced the first undead. Considering the message, having undead must have messed with the dogma. Dark One further revealed that Rhea carried the burden of the stain of being undead, which compounds that she's part of the royalty, who are at the head. The first thing Kareem needed to do as Thorlin fell away and religion shifted was to discredit Lloyd and bring the undead back into the fold. But in Dark One, undead were looked down upon by adherents of the Way of White. Again, that gets back to the trope of the Souls games and, if I recall correctly, Kingsfield, circle around time and time again, that about religion and mass religion. Lautrec is a special case in this instance because of his own beliefs and his own psychopathy, which is separate from anything religious or his past allegiances to Kareem. This is mirrored in the Ringfinger Leonhard in 3, and is a subversion of the obsessive need of Garl Vinland to protect Maiden Astrea in Demon Souls, who herself is the worst and second or third, depending on how you count it, most powerful demon in the game, but you never see that power used. Can the other Firekeepers stand on their own? That's actually pretty hard to say. We never see Anastasia die to Lautrec. She might have welcomed it, given what she's internalized. Kalon is too busy being sick, absorbing the proto-pus of men sickness around Engie. Shanalot is a Firekeeper by virtue of her making. The Firekeeper in Dark 3 has blood on her hands herself, probably signifying that she's ripped her own eyes out and allows you to kill her to prove a point, that she can't die. And the Crone Firekeepers and things betwixt have their handmade aggro on you, if you attack them too. So yeah, lots of really interesting stuff in this exchange here, and yeah, I just wanted to highlight that just to show, yeah, the extent to which you guys and gals are all awesome, and that I think, rather than looking at these discussions as, one person being right and one person being wrong, we're all sort of filling in the gaps for each other in terms of the specific things we remember from the past games, our own, unique situated perspective, and yeah, all that stuff that we've been talking about throughout this series and the previous one, Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore as well. But, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. There are several different things that, in the course of recording the first part of this episode, the pre-comments part, where, I said something and then realized later what I meant to say or what I should have said, but I think for the most part I covered most of those with sort of annotations on the screen. So I'm not going to bother recapitulating those things. But thank you, all of you, for everything, and I hope that you are, once again, as I mentioned in the previous episode, but as I'm recording this, it's still 4 days until Soulsmas. I hope you're all having a wonderful holiday season, and that all is good with you and yours, and I hope you know how much I appreciate your viewership and your participation in the comments section, and just generally being awesome people. But thank you all very, very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.